Today we will discuss a brave fighter. He was an Oglala Lakota warrior who faced down the US military and won, instilling in him a spirit of fighting among his people. There was more to him than just being brave. He was a strategic genius, protecting the land and leaving a legacy of hope for the future generations of his people. Prepare yourself as we go through the life of this remarkable leader. In 1822, Red Cloud was born on the windy plains of Nebraska under a sky filled with an event that became a part of the stories of the Lakota people and which began to shape their way of life. His parents, Walker She Thinks and Lone Man, were from different Lakota groups, showing how he would bring people together in the future. His name Red Cloud comes from the amazing sight in the sky when he was born, and there was a reason for that since he was born into an extraordinary life. Unfortunately, Red Cloud's father died when he was only 5 years old. Despite losing his father, Red Cloud grew up with a warrior's spirit. It was his uncle Smoke, a respected Lakota leader, who raised him. In his youth, Red Cloud had already demonstrated great courage when fighting the Pawnee tribe. Just like the strong prairie wind, he was brave and wild. By 1865, most things were peaceful. Nevertheless, rumors of gold in Montana caused a great deal of trouble. Westward expansion attracted many people, including miners, settlers, and those seeking to get rich fast. A peaceful life was disrupted for the Oglala Lakota people by this incident. They were disrupted by the continuous noise of hammering and the loud voices of those claiming their sacred land. During the settlement of white people on Lakota hunting lands, the US Army built a road called the Bozeman Trail. It was like a piece of their land was being cut away, and it showed how the Lakota way of life was slowly disappearing. There was a sense of broken promise among the Lakota, and their land was disappearing piece by piece. The Lakota people faced increasing pressure from the US government to move off their lands. They resisted, and a war broke out between the two sides. The US government eventually won the war, and the Lakota people were forced off their lands. In response to this loss, Red Cloud, a young warrior who loved his people deeply, decided to fight back. In fighting for what rightfully belonged to his people, he became a symbol of courage and strength. As a result of encroachment on Lakota land, a promise was broken and Red Cloud rose to prominence. For the Lakota people, protecting their land was paramount. It was a sacred duty that had been passed down from generation to generation. There is no doubt that the United States was taking more and more land from the Lakota people by building forts along a new trail named the Bozeman Trail. It was not possible for Red Cloud, a brave Lakota warrior, to just watch this happen to his land. As he gathered his people together, he began to fight back against the enemy. They were able to use the knowledge they had of the land to their advantage, hiding among the US soldiers and attacking them like ghosts in the meantime, unlike regular armies. There was fierceness in their fight, just as the buffaloes they admired fought fiercely. In spite of the fact that they fought hard for months, they were not able to push back the US soldiers. In their desperation, Red Cloud knew that if they were going to succeed, they had to do something big. They attacked Fort Phil Kearny on December 21, 1866, the most important fort on the Bozeman Trail, despite knowing that the US soldiers were well equipped with much stronger weapons. Unfortunately, the Lakotas, who were allied with the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, were unable to win the battle and were forced to retreat from it. On the battlefield, many brave warriors lost their lives in the fight for freedom. Nevertheless, it turned out that the story wasn't over yet. The retreat turned out to be a turning point for the Lakota people. It was a spark that lit a fire of hope and inspired them to move forward. Despite their struggles for survival, Red Cloud, the young warrior who dared to stand up for his people, was still just beginning his journey as a legend, and his individual struggles were surely not over. It must be noted that the Fetterman fight was a big defeat for the United States Army. It was the worst defeat in their history out west up until that point in time. During a surprise attack, Fetterman and his soldiers were caught by surprise and did not have the strength to defend themselves from the attack, and as a result they were unable to escape. Fetterman and his men were killed, and the attack marked the end of the Union's hopes of controlling the Great Plains. It was a turning point in the Great Sioux War and proved to be a major victory. The defeat of Fetterman and his men had a significant and lasting impact on the Plains Indians. The Native Americans were now free to continue their way of life and to continue their fight against the Union. This victory was considered one of the defining moments of the Great Plains War. Together with the efforts of the Lakota people over many years to resist the taking of their land by the US, this win finally persuaded the US government to initiate contact. A treaty called the Fort Laramie Treaty was signed in 1868, which recognized the Lakotas as the owners of large areas of land, including the Powder River Country and the Black Hills of the Dakota Territory. Despite all that, Red Cloud was not finished fighting for the rights of his people. It was his idea to burn down all the forts along the Bozeman Trail as a symbol of their victory. Despite the odds, he showed his people that they can still win, even when it seems impossible to do so in the beginning. Red Cloud's story, however, goes far beyond the battles he fought in his lifetime. In the aftermath of the war, he did something that was unexpected. His career changed from one of a warrior to one of a diplomat. Since the government kept taking their land, he decided to try talking things out instead of going to the courts. With his strong voice, he became a leading voice for the Lakota people, speaking out against unfair government policies and fighting against anything that threatened their way of life. It is interesting to note that throughout his life, he traveled to Washington, D.C. 5 different times, meeting with 5 different presidents in order to fight for the rights of the people of his country. In spite of the fact that he passed away in 1909, his bravery, intelligence, and the strong spirit of the Lakota people will always be remembered. Red Cloud's story is a story about never giving up, which is precisely what makes it such an inspirational tale. The Lakota leader was one of the strongest opponents the United States Army had ever encountered. He became a symbol of the pride and resistance of the Lakota people. Even though he won many battles, the fight for the land of the Lakota continued for many years after he had passed away. Throughout Red Cloud's story, we are prompted to think about how history is told, the impact of colonization, and the fight for fairness and equality for all citizens. From his experiences, what are we able to learn? What can we do to ensure that everyone's voice is heard and respected in this process? The story of Red Cloud is one of courage, resilience, and fighting for what is right. There is still resonance in this story today. In the rich tapestry of history, Red Cloud's story is just one thread. There are countless other voices that need to be heard. What's next? The legacy of Red Cloud can be a springboard for exploring the past, understanding the present, and shaping a more equitable future.